You don't say anything, okay? Come here. Come here. Hey, sir. Hey, my son would like to meet you. He really admires guys in the Army.
Hey, buddy. I'm Sean.
What unit were you in?
I'm with the 2nd Battalion Rangers.
75th?
2nd. We're 75th Ranger Regiment with the 2nd Battalion.
What's your MOS?
My MOS is 11 Bravo.
All right.
I'm what's called Attack 1. All I do is I go out on missions.
Where'd you get your 3 CIBs at?
Afghanistan.
All 3?
All 3.
You know you need to be in 3 different campaigns to get 3 CIBs, right?
This one was from Afghanistan.
Okay.
That's from Iraq.
Okay.
And that was for my 2nd rotation back to Afghanistan.
You know, no matter how many you do, you can only get 1. For Iraq, Afghanistan,
Yep.
all 3. You can only get them. You know that, right?
Because my campaign took me outside of mission lines from Afghanistan.
That doesn't make any sense. And you're in 2nd Bat Rangers?
Yep.
There it is. Where's your combat patch at?
I gave it to a little kid ago.
All right, why's your flag so low on your shoulder? It should be up here.
Got me on that one, bud.
Why are your boots are all on blast too?
Because I literally just got home
From where?
from Fort Lewis.
Fort Lewis? Is that where the Rangers are?
That's where we're stationed. I started off as a M1, as a driver for Humvees.
What's the actual MOS for that, for a driver?
My driver MOS, hold on one second. Staff sergeant.
Staff sergeant. He's calling a staff sergeant. Why is he calling a staff sergeant if he's already a staff sergeant? That doesn't make much sense.
Hey, where are you?
Why don't you just admit you're a phony? You know it's illegal, right? What you're doing right now?
Let me tell you something. If I was a phony,
Yeah?
then I wouldn't be wearing this uniform.
You wouldn't?
No.
Because you are a phony. I just called you out on about 10 different things, and all of them are bullshit. This is illegal. What you're doing right now is illegal, because you know what? I've worn that fucking uniform, and I've had friends get killed in Afghanistan wearing that fucking uniform. No, you haven't. You're full of shit.
I got 12 years in.
Stolen Valor. Right here. Stolen Valor!
Let's go.
American veterans. They're one of the most revered demographic groups in our society. Veterans make up only 5% of the U.S. population. Today's living veterans have served in conflicts dating back 75 years. They carry a legacy of many comrades who never made it home. While people like Sean Yetman may not see the harm in claiming that legacy, a network of veterans has made it their mission to expose them.
My name's Anthony Anderson. I run GuardianOfValor.com and Stolen Valor on Facebook. Served 14 years in the Army. I have 1 deployment to Afghanistan, 2009 to 2010. We looked over the video and we could, basically tell the guy was a fake.
All right, let's go.
We posted it up on our YouTube channel.
That's cool.
It went viral. Within 2 days, we had more than 5 million hits. It was more the entertainment value of the video. I hate to say it that way, but it was. And everybody wanted to know why. Why it made soldiers so mad that this guy was posing as a soldier, as a ranger. And everybody wanted to understand why Ryan was so, was so mad in the video, was so pissed off, basically. They want to know what made him so angry.
Stolen Valor. Right here. Stolen Valor!
Let's go.
Veterans served and came home. They built lives in the country they fought for. And one Vietnam vet turned Texas businessman accidentally found himself starting a movement.
My name is B.G. Burkett. I'm the co-author of the book Stolen Valor. I went to Vanderbilt University. When I got out of there, I knew I wanted to go into the military. Figured I'd join, after I graduated, and I joined the Army. And I went through basic training, advanced combat training, and then went through OCS, Officer Candidate School at the Aberdeen Proving Ground. Got commissioned as 2nd lieutenant, and then got assigned to Fort Hood. But then I kept volunteering for Vietnam, and finally I got assigned to Vietnam, and I spent a year over there. And the state of Texas asked me to lead the effort to build a state memorial to the 3,424 Texans who died in the war. And once I started that, I started becoming a whole lot more aware, because I was going to these veterans organizations like the Vietnam Veterans of America here locally, in Dallas about supporting the memorial. And the president of that, about a couple of weeks later, I saw where he was going to lecture at one of the colleges here, so I went out there to listen to the lecture, and I knew something was wrong. I mean, with things he was saying, I mean, what's going on here? I got his military record, and it just, he had been in the Army for like 2-3 weeks, had deserted, and then I gone to California, started robbing places, got caught, went to prison, came back to Texas, got arrested several more times, and went to prison 2 more times. And of course, was never in Vietnam. And I gave that to the press, and they ran the story. And then I realized that his best buddy was a guy named John Woods, who ran the vet center here in North Texas. His story was that he was in the Coast Guard, but that he was a Vietnam veteran and, you know, combat and all this thing. I got his military record. The only place he had taken a cruise in the Coast Guard was from the West Coast to Honolulu. He wasn't a Vietnam veteran, he'd just been making it up. And the press did the story on that. And then an associate of theirs who was in the local Vietnam Veterans of America chapter was a woman named Ann Funk. And she had founded a VVA chapter in Colorado and actually had been an advisor to the congressman there on veterans issues. And she came here and became one of the executives of the local chapter. And the press just loved her. I mean, she was a combat nurse who, you know, would constantly get tears in her eyes when they interviewed her about GIs are dying in my arms constantly, and I was standing in pools of blood on a daily basis, etc. I got her military record. She was been in the military for like about 3 or 4 months, and she was a dental technician. And her boyfriend got her pregnant, and they kicked her out of the military.
Meanwhile, another Vietnam veteran in Colorado was starting a project of his own.
I'm Doug Sterner. I live in Pueblo, Colorado. I'm a 2-tour Vietnam veteran. Well, my first interest was actually in the Medal of Honor because we were doing Medal of Honor activities, hosting them here in our hometown of Pueblo, Colorado. And so I began to research the Medal of Honor. This was in the early 90s, and it was pre-internet. There wasn't a whole lot out there. And as I developed that material, when the internet came along and I became internet savvy, I started a website called homeofheroes.com, where I tried to share the citations, photographs, and other basic information on Medal of Honor recipients. I launched that website in 1998. Subsequently, I began to receive emails from people, how come you don't list my uncle? He got the Medal of Honor, and you don't list him there. And I started finding that a lot of people that were claiming Medals of Honor were in fact not recipients of our nation's highest award. So that's when I first began to become aware of what we now call stolen valor. Well, I was conflicted at first when I started dealing with this. I didn't want to address stolen valor. I wanted to write stories of real heroes. And every time I'd get a report and the person was phony, they were wasting my time. About 1999, I read the book Stolen Valor by B.G. Judd Burkett, which also made me aware that falsely claiming awards was far more prevalent than I had ever imagined.
Sterner's database would become a catalog that even the federal government couldn't equal. Soon, an FBI agent named Tom Catone began using Sterner to help investigate fraud cases.
I shared with Tom that, I didn't feel good about what I was doing, and he said, Doug, you're doing the right thing. He said, I'll tell you something. I've dealt with several of these cases, and in every case that I have ever had, there is usually some underlying criminal activity beyond the stolen valor. That this isn't just a case of somebody lying about a medal or pretending to be something that they are not. This is a person that is engaging in a pattern of criminal activity, and over the decade and a half since, it's been borne out time and time again.
People like Bruce Pendley, who claimed to serve in Afghanistan when he was actually serving a prison sentence in Oklahoma. fake Army medic Danny Crane, who had multiple fraud convictions, Gregory Schaefer, who posed as a Navy SEAL on a dating website and was later convicted of raping a teenage girl, and Jason Scaletta convinced a veterans charity he was a disabled vet when he was actually an ex-con who spent time in prison. Soon, Sterner would recruit someone very close to him in the fight against stolen valor.
I'm Pamela Sterner, and I'm the author of the Stolen Valor Act. We had to write a policy analysis paper for a political science class on a policy that existed that wasn't working, or on a policy that we thought should be, or on something we thought should be a policy, and saw that the problem with that policy was that it did require that you had to be wearing an unauthorized medal. People who had plates on their car that said that they were a Medal of Honor recipient, or people that were putting that in their resume to obtain jobs and veteran status, people who were speaking at schools and public events, those people couldn't be prosecuted because they weren't actually wearing the medals. And so that's what I'm going to write my paper on. So I was so excited about that. I went to my professor the next day and said, that's what I'm going to write my paper on. And she says, who even cares about this? And I said, well, I do, you know. And I said, and not only am I going to write it, but I'm going to make sure that it becomes a federal law. And she looked at me kind of strangely, like, really? And I said, sure. And she said, have you not been paying any attention at all in your classes? Do you not realize how hard it is to get a federal law? And I said, yeah, but that's what I'm going to do.
The Sterners fought a 2-year grassroots effort to lobby for Pam's bill. In December 2006, George W. Bush signed it into law. While Vietnam vets like Burkett and Sterner fought stolen valor, America's newest war created a new generation of imposters. People like Jesse Macbeth, who made this video for an anti-war group.
Jesse served as an Army Ranger in Iraq for 16 months before being wounded and ultimately discharged from the military. He is now a member of Iraq Veterans Against the War.
We were doing the night raids in houses, and we'd pull people out, and we have them all like on the knees and zip tied, and we'll ask the guy questions, the whole family, the man of the house questions. And if he didn't answer the way we would like to, you know, we'll shoot his youngest kid in the head. And we'll keep going. That's our interrogation. He could be innocent, you know. He could just be an average Joe just trying to support his family. And if he didn't give us a satisfactory answer, we'd start killing off his family until we told us something.
I'm Mark Seavey. I am the new media manager for the American Legion. Part of my responsibility is dealing with all the stolen valor cases. I was a infantryman, most recently with the 29th Infantry Division, and I deployed to Afghanistan in 2004, 2005, and subsequently I've gone back to Afghanistan as a journalist as well. When I first came back from Afghanistan, I was fairly active in supporting the mission that we had both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And there was a lot of anti-war elements out there who were working against the war, which is their right, you know, under the First Amendment they can do what they want. But one of the things that we noticed a lot of was the fact that some of the stories just did not make a great deal of sense. And so I kind of got into stolen valor by researching what some of the anti-war activists were saying and trying to verify their stories. And a lot of times we were finding that the stories that they were telling did not match official records. So when I first started doing stolen valor work, it was almost exclusively guys from Iraq and Afghanistan who were largely claiming atrocities, the things that they were doing to civilians that just did not make any sense and which offended me on a pretty significant level. A lot of the stolen valor work came out of the first winter soldier hearings that the anti-war movement was running, and we had someone who invited us to attend because they wanted us to know that these people were telling the truth. and I met John Lilia there.
Yeah, I'm John Lilia. I'm the owner and founder of This Ain't Hell, the blog that I guess is fairly well known for stolen valor enforcement. I was an infantry platoon sergeant in Desert Storm. I retired with 19 years in the Army. And I was infantry almost the whole time. Well, I got kicked out of a lot of blogs, including the History Channel. They banned me about once a week. And so I got tired of being banned from these discussion forums and decided I'd start my own. And after a while, I started getting reports of these guys from IVAW and the anti-war groups, and they were telling wild stories about things they'd done. Jesse Macbeth, he's one of the ones that started it. And so I started checking into their backgrounds, and eventually that just morphed into everybody's background.
What's your name?
My name is Timothy Michael Poe.
Where are you from, Tim?
I'm from San Antonio.
And what do you do for a living?
Well, I spent 14 years in the military, but my career was ended in 2009. I had got hit by a grenade in Afghanistan, and it broke my back and gave me a brain injury. So that's the reason why I stutter a little bit.
So I was sitting at home one night, and my sister-in-law called me, and she said, "Are you watching America's Got Talent?" And I said, "No." And she said, "You have to turn over and watch this guy." So I flipped over, and there was an individual who had a stuttering problem. And when he sang, there was no stutter at all. And he explained that the reason he had a stuttering problem was he had been hit in the head with a rocket-propelled grenade. And within 20 minutes, I had verified what unit he was actually with, and I contacted the unit, and people came out of the woodwork and were telling me the story that Tim Poe is telling is just not accurate. That's not what happened. The only injury he sustained at all was when he fell off a truck. He was not involved in any combat or anything else. And so I started looking into it, and specifically on America's Got Talent, Tim Poe had used some pictures which he purported to have of himself in combat in Afghanistan. And by just running a reverse image, I actually found the actual sergeant who the pictures were of, and he was still deployed to Afghanistan. And I emailed him, and he's like, "That's not Tim Poe, that's me." The story itself, had it been true, was a phenomenal story. It was about a wounded guy who overcame these difficulties and really found his calling in singing. But the problem, it was predicated on complete lies. He had been to Afghanistan. He'd been there about 20 some odd days, and he injured himself falling off a truck. There was no heroism. There was no kicking in doors and using water charges to breach a building or any of the things that he had claimed. And there certainly was no RPG attack, which had caused traumatic brain injury. So that one blew up pretty quickly. And I had, at the time, I had sent it to TMZ, which immediately slapped the exclusive banner right across the front of it and basically took credit for having busted Tim Poe. And that obviously made me mad because I had put quite a bit of work into it. But ABC's 2020 picked up the story and got to me almost immediately. So I ended up on 2020 and doing a bunch of other things. But Tim Poe had been running this sort of scam for quite a long time. He'd gone to a golf tournament where he'd listed his various military awards, none of which he had actually received.
Yeah, so I started the Facebook page. It kind of blew up from there within the first 2 years. It went from just being a Facebook page to a full-blown mission. I started making contacts throughout the military community. It went from, just being, just me looking into, Rangers to, having contacts throughout the whole community. We started outing them just on Facebook. Facebook started dinging us for, you can't post pictures of somebody on Facebook without their permission. So I said, okay, how can we alleviate that? So that's how Guardian of Valor was born. I said, well, let's just make a website where we can out these people on the internet. Not only will that give us more exposure, Facebook can no longer ding us for using people's photos without their permission. So in doing so, we also gave more exposure to the frauds. We've been doing that now for almost 8 years, and we've become one of the more popular sites for exposing stolen valor.
The Navy SEALs are one of America's most elite special warfare units. From the frogmen of World War II to the mission against Osama bin Laden, the SEALs' reputation has made them a prime target of imposters.
I'm Steve Robinson. I was a Navy SEAL during the Vietnam era. I joined the Navy in 1970 and graduated from BUDS training, from SEAL Team training, and was assigned to SEAL Team 1 in February of 1971. I served the Marine Mammal Program at Inshore Undersea Warfare Group 1. I was injured in working with that program. I, as a result, was unable to requalify completely for SEAL duty, and I finished out the rest of my enlisted tour as a regular Navy communications man, a radioman in Hawaii. I got out, went to college, got on with life. I became a demonstrating blacksmith following my hobby, and I was at a Highland game gathering in Kentucky, and I saw a guy walking down the path wearing a kilt, a military blouse filled with ribbons, and he had a Navy trident, a SEAL Team trident, perched above it. And he was strutting along, and I thought, here's a guy who was in the SEAL Team. And I hadn't seen a SEAL in 25 years. Hadn't had any contact with any team guys for 25 years. But I hopped over the fence that I had in front of my demonstration area, and I went over and asked him what team he was with and where and when he'd served. And he told me he was with SEAL Team 3 in Vietnam. And I knew immediately that he was an imposter, because SEAL Team 3 didn't come into existence until a couple of decades after Vietnam. This was in the very, very early days of identifying SEAL imposters. This is 2000. And as a result, I wrote a letter to the man. It was 4 pages long, detailing his transgressions and explaining to him what a horrible affront this was to people who had actually served on the SEALs, on the SEAL team, who had trained to do the work. And I felt particularly insulted myself that he would claim to be one of the people that had gone through what I'd gone through without having actually done it. But in the year 2000, I was asked to join a very small group of other people who were working online. They were scattered across the country, but linked online. We had all those names, so we were able to check. We set up a network across America, and there were a half a dozen of us to start with, and wound up being close to a dozen of us. We had a communications group put together. We called ourselves the Phony Busters. We answered emails. We had a small website that people would send inquiries to, send an email to, and we would respond by email.
While SEAL imposters had been keeping the Phony Busters busy since 1999, the attacks on 9/11 and the U.S. military response caused the number of phony SEAL cases to explode.
1,182 men were reported to us in the month of January 2002. 1,182 men, and 3 of them were real SEALs. The media has a penchant for immediately saying that everyone wearing a uniform is a hero. Who doesn't want to be called a hero?
Hey, Philip, it's Don Shipley. How are you? Good, how are you? Oh, I'm doing fine. I'm calling from Virginia. I was looking over something. I do a bit of writing, blogging, and I understand that you and your father were both Navy SEALs.
Yes.
Could you tell me a little bit about that? I'll explain the project to you.
Don Shipley, Senior Chief Don Shipley. I got to the point where I decided when I turned 60 years old that I needed to retire from this stuff. I'd been contacted a number of times by Don over the months, and he'd asked me to check a database entry, check this name, check that name. It got to the point where he was doing it almost every week. Don and his wife had created an establishment called the Extreme SEAL Experience, where guys could come and stay for a week, and he'd put them through Hell Night, not Hell Week, teach them rappelling and shooting and movement, fire and maneuver tactics, that kind of thing. It was a tremendous, a great adventure. The local folks would encounter SEAL imposters, and they'd contact him because he was a very high-profile individual there. He had been contacting me fairly regularly, and it got more and more numerous. Finally, I called him up and I said, you want to do this all the time? I can arrange that. I went back to the people who were handling it, and I arranged for Don to get a copy of the database. And then, shortly after that, on the eve of turning 60, I said, Don, I'm ready to retire from this, and would you like to do it full time? And he thought about it for a while, and finally he says, yeah, but I'll have to call on you from time to time for advice on how to handle this or that. And I said, well, not a problem. When I got Osama bin Laden, for instance, he called me up, and I was online for a month, and we were each handling about 100 inquiries a day. But Don saw a way to do it that I hadn't, and he went to YouTube, and he started broadcasting the phony SEAL of the week.
Class 70.
And he and his wife Diane are incredibly talented when it comes to just humorous banter back and forth. The idea of setting up the situation so that when they show you what the imposter is claiming in the way of the stolen valor claims, it's laughable. Not only is it laughable, but it's insulting, and you can see why it's insulting. It's not just words on paper. You actually see him talking with the guy on a cell phone. And they used to say SEALs were the quiet professionals. They work in the shadows. And I'd just as soon stay that way. Don's got the TV thing down pat.
SEALs help each other out, man. We're a brotherhood. So, Tom, I'm going to help you out with a little hand and arm signals. Hey, Tom, you know what that means in SEAL team? You better learn. It means cover me. I'm fucked.
After the Stolen Valor Act of 2005 became law, the government had prosecuted a handful of imposters. One of them was a California politician named Xavier Alvarez. He introduced himself at a local water board meeting with this speech.
I'm a retired Marine of 25 years. I just retired the year 2001. Back in 1987, I was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, but I got wounded many times at the same time.
But Alvarez never served a day in the military.
You don't have the Medal of Honor, and you claim that you do.
It's not that. They got it all miswritten.
Do you have the Medal of Honor?
No, I don't.
Why did you claim that you do?
When I explained myself incorrectly. People took it out of context.
Alvarez appealed his conviction, stating that it violated his right to free speech under the First Amendment. The High Court sided with Alvarez and declared the Stolen Valor Act unconstitutional in 2012.
Supreme Court, they just see medals and awards as little bits of ribbon.
These guys are continuing to prey on the American public, and we're going to put them behind bars.
While these two soldiers lost a battle, in his opinion, Justice Anthony Kennedy told them to keep fighting. He wrote, "The remedy for speech that is false is speech that is true. This is the ordinary course in a free society."
people say that we're upset about the case in Alvarez. The reality is we view the Alvarez case is important for what we do because the court specifically said in there that the proper way to handle stolen valor is for us to expose these people to public ridicule. That, you know, maybe they're lying about all these things. The proper way to handle that is to stand up and say, you are not telling the truth, tell us the truth. And so the Alvarez decision for us, everyone seems to think that we're all fired up about the Alvarez decision and think it's a horrible decision. The reality is the Alvarez decision kind of brought the stolen valor hunting community to the fore because the court specifically said that the best way to handle this is to tell the truth.
Despite laws on the state and federal levels, stolen valor will likely never be completely beaten. But those veterans who've made it their mission to expose imposters say they're not leaving their posts. And the man who started the movement welcomes the reinforcements.
Then I go to Vietnam and I'm in a unit that lost hundreds of GIs and over 2,000 wounded. And in my world, these frauds are claiming that they serve shoulder to shoulder with those people. And it's an outrage. It just, and then I discovered by accident that I could do something about it, but I could only do it one at a time. So the fact that these other people are doing it now, I'm very, very grateful.